Well, hello there, and welcome to the Forest Biometric Research Institute's webinar series. My name is Brock Purvis, and today we will be looking at how to utilize ArcPro with FPS. As many of you know, the Forest Projection and Planning System software has the unique ability to spatially link FPS with ArcMap. Historically, this connection has been through the use of personal geodatabase files that can be read by both FPS and ArcMap. With the introduction of ArcPro software, personal geodatabase files are no longer supported within this GIS framework and therefore cannot be directly linked to FPS. The following webinar contains a process that is intended to provide one solution in navigating between ArcPro and FPS. This example uses the Puget, FPS, and GIS datasets that are provided with the FPS software install package. You will need both ArcMap and ArcPro on your personal computer to duplicate this process. To get started, let's just go in and open ArcMap. And with ArcMap open, go over to the catalog and let's go find your CFPS GIS Puget GIS 2019. And from that list, let's take a look at the Veg 2019 layer. So I'll just put that under my table of contents, and you should have something that looks about like this. If we go over here and look at our Veg 2019 layer and right click and look at the properties, what we're looking at for the data type, personal geodatabase, and it's in this GIS 2019.mdb just above my cursor there. So this is the file type that can be read by ArcMap and FPS, but not ArcPro. For ArcPro and FPS connectivity, we need to change this file type, and we're going to change it to a file geodatabase. So to do that, I'm going to just close this layer property dialog box and go over to catalog. And where it says CFP7 GIS, I'm going to highlight that, right click, go down to new file geodatabase. And then I'm going to rename the default name to something more meaningful. So I'm just going to call it personal to file geo. All right. With that in place, we're going to go to our Puget.mdb, and we're going to right click that and go down to export to geodatabase multiple. Say OK. Now our input features will be the Veg 2019, and our output geodatabase will be the personal to file. We'll say add and then OK. And if it's working correctly, you should see some blue feature class to geodatabase down at the bottom of the screen. Well, having performed that export, let's see if it worked. Let's go back into catalog and let's look at our personal to file geodatabase, and we'll again look at the Veg 2019. And we'll just put that up onto the screen. I'm going to get rid of the other one. And what we're looking for here, if we go down to properties, recall before we had a .mdb, now we've got a .gdb. It's got all the same attributes in it, and this is a file that we can use in conjunction with ArcPro. So let's go up and go ahead and save our work and then close out of this. Next, you're going to want to go ahead and open up ArcPro, and when you get that open, go into catalog, and we're going to go down to our personal to file geo that we just made, and we're going to go ahead and put in the Veg 2019, and we'll take a look at that. And then let's just go in and look at our attributes table. And let's look at our flag, and let's just do a sort descending And we see we've got 3 flag 10s, and then a bunch of 2s, and down below that are a whole bunch of 1s. So the biggest flag we've got right now is a 10. It's at this point, now that you've converted from a personal geodatabase to a file geodatabase, that you can go in and make your edits for any acquisitions, dispositions, change of line work, stand delineation, all that good stuff. And once you're satisfied with your ownership layer, what we want to do is we want to be able to link that to FPS. So to do that, we're going to take our file geodatabase and we're going to turn it into a shapefile. While FPS cannot attach directly to file geodatabases, they can link to DBase files. To do this, I'm going to go ahead and close the attributes table and open the catalog. And I'm just going to go into my GIS, right-click, New, Folder, and I'm going to call this File Geo to Shape. All right. With that created, I'm going to go down to our personal to File Geo, and I'm going to scroll down to Veg 2019, and I'm going to right-click that, and I'm going to go to Export Feature Classes to Shapefiles. I'm going to select that, and my input feature is going to be Veg 2019, and I want to send this output file to File to Shape and say OK, and I'm going to come down here and just hit Run. Once that's finished processing, if we go look in our catalog, in our File to Shape, we should have this shape file, and it should be identical to the file geodatabase we just copied it from. And if we look in our properties, again it says we got a shape file and the data type and a .shp. So okay, we are now ready to link FPS with our GIS. So let's save our ArcPro and let's open the Puget FPS database. With your Puget inventory database open, let's go over to external data and new data source. We're going to go down from this from database option down to this DBase file. Go ahead and select that. And we're going to want to go find the file. In this case, it's in my GIS file to shape folder. And click on that and say open. And we're going to want to do the link to the data source by creating a link table. So this bottom option, and go ahead and say OK. So what that's done is it's put our Veg 2019 as a link table into FPS. If we open this up, this is the attribute table we were looking at in ArcGIS. And before we can really do anything, we need to change the naming convention of this from Veg 2019 to Veg Poly. So I'm going to right click on this and just go up to rename. And I'm going to again just call it Veg Poly. Let's go up and look at our admin table. And let's go over to this flag column. And if we look, we've got flags of 1 and 2. And if we recall, in our GIS side of things, we had 3 flag 10s. So let's go ahead and update the admin table in FPS from our GIS flag column. And to do that, we're going to go over and go into Editors, update FPS from GIS Veg Poly, and we're going to take this first option, import flags, GIS label, and theme from GIS Veg Poly. So I'm going to select that, and it says that it's been updated. Okay. So let's check. In our admin table, if we look in our flag columns, we've now got 1, 2, and 10. So we just updated from our GIS into FPS. Well, now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this flag of 1 and I'm going to turn these all into 88s. So I'm going to go over to replace 1 with 88. Replace all. Alright, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to close the admin table. I'm going to go back into add-ins, editors, and update GIS veg poly from FPS. And I'm going to export again just the admin flag, GIS label, and theme to veg poly GIS. So I'm going to go ahead and run that and say OK. Now let's close our FPS database and open ArcPro. With ArcPro up and running, we've got our Veg 2019 shapefile that we linked to FPS. So let's go ahead and take a look at the attribute table in here. And once it loads, we can see in our flag column where we didn't have any 88s. Now we've got a whole bunch of them. So we have just taken data from FPS and we're able to successfully transition it back into ArcGIS. And so the linkage works really quite nicely. The last thing we're going to look at is transitioning from shapefile format back to file geodatabase format. So to do that, I'm going to just start by closing the attribute table and go over to catalog. And in the GIS folder, I'm going to create a new file geodatabase. And I'm going to go ahead and call this one shape to file geo. And deselect that. And over here we have our updated Veg 2019 with our new flags of 88 in there. We want to get that into a file geodatabase. And we're going to put it into this one. So I'm just going to right click and go to export feature class to geodatabase. And I'm going to select that. And our input is our Veg 2019 shape. And our output is going to be shape to file. Say OK. And I'm going to just come down here and select run. So that looks like it's worked. I'm going to go ahead and remove that shape file. And I'm going to go over to catalog. And over here where it's shape to file, I'm going to come down and look at this Veg 2019. If we go down to properties, we can see we're back in a file geodatabase world now. That's what we want. And if we open up the attribute table, it's retained our updated flags, and so the process is complete. We have just transitioned from the original personal geodatabase into a file geodatabase for use with ArcPro. Within ArcPro, we then created a shapefile for use with FPS, which allowed us to update both FPS and GIS, and then we transitioned back into a file geodatabase for future use with ArcPro. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this webinar. Stay tuned to our website as additional instructional webinars will be coming soon. Thank you and have a good day.